Good morning, everyone. And I think from the past 3 or 4 days, you must be hearing about artificial intelligence a lot, isn't? So I don't know how much you have learned, and you must have got bored also listening the same kind of things. So today I will not talk about artificial intelligence, but I would talk about what is data analytics and how it can be or it is useful in a smart grid. Okay, everyone knows these days data analytics is like in every field, data analytics has become very fascinated, isn't? And it is an interesting term. Wherever it comes, it attracts people's attention. And so this is the same way, like in a smart grid also, there are so many sources and so many data which can be utilized. If we utilize it efficiently, then definitely we can gain, or our grid will be benefited. Okay, so so I have planned my presentation in three parts. Basically, I've divided. So first thing is like big data analytics. Now, big data is also a buzzword these days. So what is big data analytics? We'll talk about this. Uh, then a very important source of data in smart grid is phasor measurement units. Okay, so we'll discuss briefly about phasor measurement units. What are these phasor measurement units? How these units work? What these units measure? Okay, and how can they be helpful in smart grid? And after that, I'll present a case study which we have done here. So we have utilized this data from phasor measurement units and utilized it for fault identification. So these three things we will be discussing in this presentation. So let us first see what is data analytics. So data analytics, basically, you should have, first of all, you should have a huge amount of data. And from that data, we all know that it is not a new thing. Data analytics is not a new thing, because earlier when data was there, we were using statistics. These days also it is used. Statistically, we can analyze this data, but there are different methods also now which are more suitable if we consider the data which is available today. Okay. So first of all, we should have a large amount of data, and from that data, we should use certain algorithms, certain means to extract certain meaningful information from the data. And once we are able to extract some meaningful information, that information can be utilized for certain purpose. And that information we are able to use to display it. Okay. So what is this data analytics? We can say this is like three important stages are there. That first of all, you should have data, huge amount of data. Then using certain algorithms, certain means, you should be able to extract certain information, because as a huge data, if you see this, you will not be able to understand anything. So you should have certain algorithms through which you are able to extract certain information, and then you are displaying that information to the audience, to the persons for whom this can be useful. Okay. So basically, it is the discovery, it is finding out meaning and finding out meaningful patterns in data, and then communicating these patterns to the audience or to the people for whom this may be important. Okay. It is an automated process. It is an automated process which is used to discover something new in the pattern, to which should be valid, useful also, and potentially interesting knowledge we are trying to gain from large data sources, which is otherwise difficult to uncover. Okay. So we are daily, I think all of you must be seeing this. Everybody, I think it is now a lifestyle change that everybody goes to social media. Everybody is watching videos on YouTube. Everybody is going to Facebook, isn't Twitter. So now, if you must be finding it out that when we are logged in, so it is monitoring our activity. Isn't like based on our interest, whatever activity we are doing or what kind of videos we are watching regularly, it is monitoring. And once you go to the app, it will automatically show to you only those kind of videos. Lot of videos are available, so how they will show to you? So they are finding based on our interest that which kind of videos we are watching, so it will give to us only that kind of videos. So this is like you can see easily the example of data analytics. They are just monitoring our activity, and based on that activity they are taking this information that what kind of interest do we have, in which kind of topics we are watching the video. So those kind of things they are watching, and they're suggesting the same things to us. So this is a very important information. Like in all the Netflix or whatever you take this kind of applications, they will show it like this only to you. Okay, so this is a very important thing in daily life, a very important example of data analytics. Now, so visual tools and techniques, they are the preferred means of communicating the results of performing data analytics, because visual tools, they are very easy to interpret. So whatever information you are extracting, it is very important to show it in a, like the visualization of that information also should be very clear or very easy, so that and people are able to interpret that information easily. Okay, so this is the preferred means. If you are getting certain information from this by performing this data analytics, then you should be able to communicate it also in a visual form. Okay? So this is what data analytics is. Now, these days we always hear the term big data. Rather than data analytics, these days the term is big data analytics. So what is big data? Okay. So big data, any data which is characterized by these 5 V's: volume, velocity, variety, veracity, and value. Any data which is characterized by these 5 V's falls under the category of big data. Okay. So let us first see what does volume means. So volume means that the data set is quite a large, and it requires a large storage also to store that data. Okay. So how many number of records are there, and it requires a large storage capacity to store that data. So that is referred by the volume. Okay. So that a huge volume data. Then velocity. So velocity means it tells you the speed or the frequency at which the data is generated, and at the frequency at which it is transferred and it is collected. Obviously, the data generation frequency will be obviously higher than the collection speed because together you must be collecting, but the data will be generated at a very high speed. Okay, so this is another important characteristic of big data. Then variety. So variety means these data are generated from multiple sources, and these sources are diverse in nature. Their formats, the data formats are also different. They could have multi-dimensional fields. So basically, what do we mean? It is not only like in power system, if we see, it is like the data from this substations we are measuring, voltage phasors and current phasors and power, all these data are there. So these data have certain different dimensional fields or different formats. But these days, like video and image data are also being captured at in certain countries. Okay, so this kind of data is also available. Then you have weather data also, because we are using renewable.
4616 8000.
Please kindly
mute yourself.
0652.
Let us sing, ma'am.
Yeah. So can I start now?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry, somebody
Okay.
didn't
Okay. Okay. So like we have this renewable energy sources also. So we need to use this properly. So we need to have renewable energy forecasting, like solar power forecasting, wind speed forecasting. These forecastings are being done. Load forecasting is done. So see, all these data they are in different formats. So for renewable energy forecasting, we need to know the weather forecasting also. It is dependent on that part also. So different kinds, means from different diverse sources, we are getting the data, and that data is in different formats, and it is in different field also. So this is a variety of structured, unstructured data. So mixed kind of data is there in this big data. It is not only one particular structure will be there. Okay, so this is referred as like variety of data. Then veracity. So veracity means it refers to the trustworthiness of the data. Whatever data you are getting can be trust that it is the truth, because whatever analytics you are performing, it depends on that how truth is the data, then how accurate is the data. So this is also a very important characteristic, because your whole analysis, it is depending upon the data, and if its data is not correct, then your analysis also is not correct. Whatever information by performing analytics, that can be wrong if your data is not accurate. So this is another important characteristic that you need to identify, that whether your data is a quality data, can it be reliable, or we can trust that it is the true data. So this is another important point. And then value. So from that data, if we are able to extract useful benefits and insights about the system, okay, then only that data is big data. So usually, like this is very common. Initially, when the data analysis started, it started with 3 V's. So initially it was volume, velocity, and variety. And then later on, this 4 V's became. So this veracity was added to the 3 V's. So now it became 4 V's. Now with 4 V's, it was identified that value means it is many kind of data are available, but some may be redundant. They may not be useful. They may not be able to provide you the true useful information. Then that data will not fall. So then value 5th V was added later. And recently I came to know that it is 6 V, it is 8 V. So many V's are being added to this data, but we will stick to like 5 V's. These are the main characteristics, okay, of big data. So any data which is characterized by these 5 V's, that we can call as big data. Now, how this big data evolved? So you see this, that in 1970, the data was in MBs. Then after a decade, it became in GBs. Then it moved to like terabytes, then petabytes. And after petabytes, it has come to exabytes. And I think now the data is continuously increasing. So maybe it will go to zettabyte or yottabyte. So let us first consider like what is a smart grid. Okay. So how many of you here, I would like to interrupt, like I would like to interact with the participants, that what do they know about a smart grid?
This is Praveen Gupta this side. Good morning.
Yeah. Good morning.
Basically, a smart grid is one which can take decisions based on some data inputs available to it, whether it is load shedding, whether it is switching on and off the grid, or finding the fault, or for that particular thing, they may be able to do it on its own.
Yeah.
Without the human intervention.
Yeah. So anything else which can be added? Anyone would like to add to this? Actually, there are many things associated with the smart grid. So we'll see that smart grid, it will have definitely like alternative energy sources will be present. Because of the presence of alternative energy storage, because of the alternative energy sources, you need to have energy storage also in the system. So this will also be a part. Then this smart grid concept, so basically The important thing, as you told, that it should be able to identify itself that the fault has occurred from the data inputs. It should be able to identify whether the fault has occurred, where the fault has occurred, and it should be able to remove that automatically, isn't? So basically, this thing we can say that the smart means a grid which is capable of self-healing, isn't? So that we can call it smart grid. But then this smart grid, definitely it will be having alternative energy sources, then energy storage, then electric vehicles, green power sources, all those you can say. And the most important characteristics, two most important characteristics are there of a smart grid, which makes it different from the traditional grid. So in traditional grid, the power flow was in one direction only, isn't? It was like radial, means that kind of a structure that you have generation, then top down you have different levels of transmission, and then from to the bottom as you go, it will have distribution. But now if you see this smart grid, so it is a mixed kind of thing, isn't it? Because the power flow, you are connecting renewable energy sources also in the system. So the power flow is bidirectional, depending upon whether these sources, how they are behaving when they are connected in the grid. So at particular moment of time, how they are behaving. So one important characteristic is that we have two-way of power flow, is it? And another important thing is, because we are talking about that this smart grid should be capable of self-healing, and it should be monitoring, so it should be completely like automated type, isn't? This is what the concept is. So when it should be completely automated type, then it means you should have lot of sensors deployed in the grid. And these sensors will be generating a large amount of data, and these data, so it should be, means we are communicating it to the one side, and we are receiving also, like customer, they are sending the data also and receiving also. So the communication is also two-way. So the power flow is also two-way, and the communication is also two-way. Now see, in this smart grid, one thing which we talk about is energy efficiency also. We want to make the system energy efficient, and we want to utilize all the energy sources available to be optimally. It is like, you must have heard about demand response program also. So demand response also will be, have you heard about demand response program?
Yes, ma'am.
Who said?
Praveen this side.
Yeah. So what is this demand response? This demand response basically is facilitating this customer that if they are if it is a peak time, so the price is more, or you say at the peak time, and you are supporting the grid by reducing your load, you are participating in demand response, isn't that kind of thing? So during that part also, you will be able to communicate to you can say some agent, or you are able to receive the information also. So like everywhere, whenever we have deployed these sensors and these devices, we are communicating, both sides communication is there. So the important characteristic of a smart grid is two-way power flow also, and two-way communication also. So these deployment of these kind of sensors, so many sensors, which will help in making the grid smart, they are generating a large amount of data. So how can we utilize that data? So what are the sources of big data in smart grid? So one is like advanced metering infrastructure. So these days, like everywhere, the utilities are in the process of deploying smart meters, isn't every, I think every electricity company, it is trying to deploy smart meters. So the smart meters, now you see this smart meters, they are measuring electricity consumption every 15 minutes. Okay, so if every 15 minutes they are measuring this electricity consumption, so it is being noticed that if the smart meter data is collected every 15 minutes from 1 million devices, so a total of 2,920 TB data will be produced per year. See the size of the data it will be producing, isn't? So this data, when you are collecting regularly at every 15 minutes also, you are collecting it. And so this, and from so many houses, when you are having that many data, so you should be able to get certain information. Now the challenge is like you need to identify that this data, what different kind of information you can extract from this data. So different applications are being proposed. Okay. So one is this advanced metering infrastructure. Then why this is like on the distribution side, we can say that advanced metering infrastructure. So this kind of data, it can be utilized for solving the problems related to distribution system. Then comes wide area monitoring systems. So wide area monitoring systems, they employ phasor measurement units to monitor areas located geographically far away. So basically this phasor measurement units, they measure voltage phasor and current phasors. Okay. So and then after measuring this voltage and current phasors, they transmit this data to PDC. Okay. And then their data PDC, at PDC different data are aggregated and then transmitted to the higher level. So this kind of phasor measurement units, they are known to generate data like at the rate of 25 to 120 samples per second. See the frequency at which the data is generated, and then you are collecting this data from different places where you have installed PMUs, and then you are gathering this data. So Hitachi has reported that each PMU in a system, it produces a minimum of 80 GB of synchrophasor data per year, considering 30 Hertz reporting rate. If the reporting rate is 30 Hertz, then 80 GB of the synchrophasor data will be produced in a year, okay, from a PMU. So now you are deploying large number of PMUs, and these days the reporting rate is also increased. Okay, so imagine that how large the data will be produced. Then distribution automation. So for automating the system, usually various sensors are deployed, and which these sensors, they take multiple samples of data per unit time. So all these are the sources of big data. Now we have to see that how these sources can be utilized to improve our system reliability and monitoring of our system. Okay, so different applications exist for smart meters, for PMUs, for these kind of sensors. Different applications are being reported. So now what is the big data analytics in smart grid? So its objective is that we want to investigate very large volumes of data which are produced by various components in the smart grid, and then transform this data into meaningful information or inputs such as pattern of operation or alarm trends or fault detection and control commands. So like I'll tell you later in my slides that like PMUs, they are measuring voltage and current phasors, but their applications are huge. Okay, they are measuring voltage and current phasors in this system, but their applications are huge. You need to think like though so many data are being generated, but we need to identify that how this data can be utilized for any particular purpose. Okay. So this is the objective. Like you have the source. See, you know that smart grid has a lot of sensors available. Now we know the main sources of big data also in the smart grid. Now you know these sources are there. You need to know that what kind of data they will generate, and then how, for what applications this data can be utilized. This is a very important research problem. So you should be identifying the amount of data is available and how, for what purposes it can be utilized. So for health monitoring or for what different kind of purposes. That is a very important research problem in big data analytics in smart grid. Okay. So why this big data analytics is important? Its objective is that, but how it is important or why it is important? So we want to make our smart grid automated, isn't? So every like if the fault is happening, then it should be able to identify the fault. It should be able to locate the fault. It should be able to clear that automatically and then reclose. So return to normal operation. So we should collect like accurate information in an automated fashion. So therefore, it is important. It is important for automated decision making. When you are analyzing this data, you are trying to get certain information from that data. So that information will help you in making the decisions also. Okay, so that you can take the automated decision making is also possible. Then if you are knowing about the system state, all those data, they will provide you some information about the system state. So you can identify, sir, if some event is happening or not. If some event is happening, then what control action you should be able to take. So to control events in a timely manner, this data analytics is very important. And it is also important to make the grid more intelligent, efficient, and productive. Okay. So now, what are the different types of analytics which can be done? Okay. So this analytics are classified into 4 types. One is descriptive analytics. So this descriptive analytics, it is the simplest and commonest method to perform with the data. Okay. So it actually simply tells you what happened in the system. Okay. So when you are collecting this data, and it will be simple, like if you monitor this data, but it is not possible to monitor a large number of data that way, and you need to perform certain stages before you analyze this thing. But you can monitor those data, and then by monitoring you can identify that if something is happening. Like suppose this phasor measurement unit, they are not simply giving voltage phasors and current phasors, but they also give you frequency information. Okay, they are also providing you rate of change of frequency. So all this data, they are transferred at a single time with a single timestamp. Okay, so that is known as a frame. Okay, data frame. So they transfer this data frame. Now, if you monitor this and continuously, like you are receiving those data, so if you monitor, and if there is any change, like a frequency, there could be with the transient changes in the system, that frequency may change suddenly. So if that is changing, that will give you that some event has happened, isn't it? So like this kind of thing, if you monitor, so usually descriptive analytics, it is performed. The output is usually in the visualization form. Okay, so that you can look to the visuals and then identify that something has happened. So when you perform this descriptive analytics, you basically are able to identify what happened in the system. So first thing is what happened. Then after that, obviously, we are curious to know that if something has happened, why did it happen? So this can be known by performing diagnostic analytics. So once you know that something has happened, so you need to focus on the data available within certain time frame. Then you need to analyze that data to identify why did it happen. Means when the event has occurred, so before that, what was the condition? After that, what was the condition? This kind of window you need to take and then identify why did it happen. So all these analytics, basically they are related. So this will give some insight into the system behavior. Okay. Now, after knowing why did it happen, you can perform like predictive analytics, like what will happen. Once you know why did it happen, what will happen. Okay, so this predictive analytics, as the name suggests, it is mostly like forecasting of things. So you have a database with you and you are using that database to identify that what will happen after some time, after some particular moment of time or after some period of time. So these give some insight into the system behavior. So once we have performed like descriptive analytics, what happened, diagnostic analysis, why did it happen, predictive analytics, what will happen, then you want to take certain action. So you want to identify how can we make it happen. We want our system, certain event has happened, but we want that our system should be stable and secure. So then we want to know that what action should be taken. If this event has happened, what action should be taken. So that is what prescriptive analytics. Okay, so this will tell you basically the action which we should be able to take to achieve certain objective. Okay, so these are the 4 important types of analytics which are interrelated, but they are performed in this stages also. Then what are the data analytics stages? Okay, so first of all, the data should be generated. So you need to identify the sources at which the data should be generated, and you should place the devices which are able to generate the data. So first of all, the data should be generated, and then once the data is generated, you should be able to acquire that data. So data acquisition is the next stage, which comprises of data collection. First of all, you are collecting that data from the different sources. Then once the data is collected at one place, then this data needs to be transmitted to data centers, where the data from all this will be transmitted. Means it will be performed in some stages, isn't it? So at one place, it is not like from many hundred sources you are getting the data and at one place you will collect. So like 4 or 5 places you are collecting the data, then it is collected at one stage, then that data will be transmitted. So it will be performed in stages. So after data generation, you are performing data collection, you are collecting those data, then you are transmitting those data. Then before performing or before storage, you should pre-process that data. That pre-processing means if some error is there in this data, you should be able to identify. If erroneous data is there, you should be able to remove that data. If redundant data is there, you should be able to remove that data. So all this are under pre-processing. So once the data is transmitted, after data transmission, you need to perform data pre-processing, and after pre-processing only you will store that data so that this data can be used for analysis. Okay, so these are the different data analytics stages, and it should be performed in this order only. Okay. Now, what are the data analytics algorithms? So usually, see, this data analytics, they are performed. There are statistical methods also which can be used for this large amount of data, and there are like artificial intelligence algorithms also. But these days, AIs are gaining more attention for this data analytics, or maybe hybrid method also can be used. Okay, so these data analytics algorithms, so they are based on like supervised learning, unsupervised learning, like that. So these are like supervised learning. So I hope you must be knowing now what is supervised learning, isn't it? Supervised learning means output should be known. With the input, you also know that for this particular kind of input, you have this output. So when it is available in the data, then you can utilize supervised learning. Okay, so like decision tree algorithm can be used for I hope certain people, I think someone gave this lecture on decision tree, so you must be knowing now what is decision tree. So basically it is used for classification problems. Decision tree is used for classification problems. So then Bayes is there. So this is a probabilistic method which is based on Bayes theorem. And then support vector machine classifier. So this is also everybody must be knowing because it is very commonly used these days, isn't it? So this algorithm basically it finds a separating hyperplane between the two classes by mapping the labeled data to a high dimensional feature space. So the basic SVM classifier is the binary classifier. It is able to classify between the two classes. Then we have K nearest neighbor also. So a K nearest neighbor, so it is a non-parametric method which is based on minimum dissimilarity between new items and the labeled items in different classes. And then random forest. So random forest is basically collection of decision trees. Okay, so this is an algorithm which consists of a collection of simple tree predictors, which are decision trees only. And this random forest is also used for different purposes. Then after the supervised learning, there are unsupervised learning. So unsupervised learning is like you are trying to find out certain similarity in the data, or you are grouping the data based on certain similarity. That is what unsupervised learning is there. So you don't know the actual output here. Okay, you don't know the true output. You only know the inputs. So when you have only inputs available to you, you can utilize unsupervised learning. So for unsupervised learning, you have K-means algorithm. So this is an unsupervised learning method with a given number of clusters. Here you need to identify that how many number of clusters should be formed from the given data. And then the data is sorted based on the average value of data in each group as the centroid. Then K-medioids method is there. So this is also similar to K-means. And then hierarchical clustering is there. Then DB-scan, so a density-based clustering algorithm to identify clusters with specific shape in distribution. Then expectation maximization, an iterative way to approximate the maximum likelihood estimates for model parameters. So these are different kinds of supervised learning. So all these are AI-based only. Then this FP growth, frequent pattern growth algorithm is there. Correlation. So this correlation, so it is trying to find out correlation between the two data sets, two data. Okay, so if they are correlated or not. So for identifying the correlation, we can use frequent pattern growth algorithm and a priori algorithm. Then these algorithms are always important for dimensionality reduction. See, when you have so many data available with you, whenever this data analytics you are performing, it is very important. See, it is not necessary to use the redundant data. So, and every data may not be important. So you need to identify that which data is giving you the maximum information about the event you want to take. So this dimensionality reduction is also very important. It is not necessary to reduce a large number of inputs because it will unnecessarily increase the timing. Okay, and when you are using this, most of these applications, they are used for fast monitoring also, for activities which we want fast to be, the algorithm should be fast enough so that you can identify, monitor them in real time. And because the traditional methods, they are not that fast. So dimensionality reduction is also very important. So it is like, for dimensionality reduction, we can use principal component analysis, self-organizing map, and random matrix. Now, what are the big data applications? So as I told you that it can be used for fault detection, whether you consider a microgrid or you consider our big power grid also, this for fault detection, because we are already deploying many devices in the network. So the data which we are receiving, like as I will be telling you later in my presentation, that we are utilizing phasor measurement units data for fault identification. So these data, when they are available, they can be utilized for fault detection, whether the fault has happened. And rather than saying fault detection, I think I can say for event occurrence. These kind of data, they can be utilized for identifying any kind of event in the system. So what kind of events are possible in the system? Like some generator is stripped, that is also an event. Some transmission line is stripped, that is also an event. Some load loss is there, that is also an event. So whenever this will be happening, your voltage and current phasors will undergo a change. And that is how we utilize these data available from PMUs to identify if some event has happened. Because whenever some event will happen, there will be a change in voltage and current phasors, there will be a change in frequency, there will be change in rate of change of frequency. So all these data are being supplied by phasor measurement units. Only thing is you have to identify that which data will be more useful for a particular application. Okay, so this fault detection is there. Then predictive maintenance or condition-based maintenance. So these days in UK, I heard that they are using drone technology to monitor the condition of for asset management. Okay, so they are monitoring the health of their transmission system utilizing this drone technology. So they are collecting the images and then they are performing image analysis. Okay, to find out if some maintenance some repair is needed or some maintenance needs to be done. So these kind of data are also used for predictive maintenance or condition-based maintenance. This is one example I've shown, but other data also you need to see which kind of data you can utilize. Then transient stability analysis. So transient stability analysis is basically this angular stability problem also. And then when you are getting this angular information from PMUs, you should be able to use that data to identify if some transient instability is going to happen. Okay, so this is also this has been also very used for this transient stability analysis. Then electric device state estimation or health monitoring. So we can place certain devices on along with this whatever device you want to monitor, and then you are continuously monitoring the data taken from there to monitor the health of that device. Then power quality monitoring. So you are having like power quality analyzers. You are continuously taking those data, and when you are taking those data, you can identify that whether your power quality is good or not. Topology identification. As I told you that whatever events it happens in the system, everything is reflected in voltage, current, frequency, rate of change of frequency. So these data can be utilized to identify what is the topology of the system or is there any change. Then renewable energy forecasting. For forecasting, these have been used since long for forecasting purposes. The historical database has been used since long. So renewable energy forecasting we can use. Then for load forecasting we can use. Then for load profiling. So load profiling means like you are monitoring the electricity consumption of a single customer. That is basically load profiling. So when you are having this smart meter data, that data you can use for load profiling. So you are monitoring the electricity consumption pattern of a customer and then trying to identify his behavior. Okay, like load electricity consumption behavior. And then load disaggregation. So once you have this load profiling of a customer, then load disaggregation means how different devices. From that, you need to identify how different devices are run. So power consumed by independent individual devices, and then you can try to understand like at what moment of time which devices are being added, which particular device is being used at this moment of time. So these all can be used to understand the electricity consumption pattern of the customer. And then non-technical loss detection. So basically the smart meters, many applications have been proposed to identify theft detection using smart meter data. Okay, so it can be used. So this is about big data applications. Now we will discuss like phasor measurement units. Just a minute, I will start. So phasor measurement unit. Now earlier when the phasor measurement units were not invented, that time we were using current transformers and potential transformers to measure the voltage and current at the buses and the lines, isn't it? So these current transformers and potential transformers, they were measuring only voltage and current magnitude. Okay, and then these data from different substations, they were being transferred to through RTU to the SCADA system. Okay, and then it is passed through the energy management system. And in the energy management system, when we collect these magnitudes of current and voltage, we were performing state estimation of the system to know the phasor angles. Okay, voltage phasor angles. So voltage are the basic state variables. So we were knowing by performing state estimation, we were able to know the voltage phasors also. Okay, so this is how we were knowing. But then that time also we need to perform that whatever data you are receiving in the EMS, you need to perform that whether that data is sufficient. If some missing data is there, you should be able to identify that data, or otherwise you will not be able to gain information about that particular moment of time. Okay, and this data was provided to the EMS once in every 4 to 6 seconds. Okay, so this was the rate. Now, if you know if you know the voltage phasors and current phasors in the system, then you are able to identify each and everything required for the system. You can identify the voltage, active power flows in the line, reactive power flows in the line, isn't? So this can be easily identified. Now, there were certain limitations of SCADA, so this RTUs which were using power line carrier communication for transmitting information to the EMS. And if a connection breaks with one of the RTU, so it will completely break the communication from the remaining RTUs. Okay. And another thing was that when this information, like every 4 to 6 seconds, one sample was used to be collected with this SCADA system, traditional system. Okay, so it was not able to capture the dynamics of the power grid. It is very fast. You are not able to see the variations in the happening between this like seconds. In seconds only, there are a lot of variations in the system. So it was not able to capture that dynamics of the power grid. Then SCADA measures magnitude only of various sinusoidal voltage and current. It was not measuring the phasor values. Okay, so these were the limitations of this. So you can see that how long it will, like once you have taken here, then it will be continuously, you are assuming that this voltage is constant till this period. Then after that you have taken the next sample here, so assume that it has dropped it like this. In between, whatever dynamics was there, you have missed those dynamics. And if suppose those dynamics were available, that dynamics must have been giving certain information when certain event is going to happen. Okay, so this is the problem with this SCADA thing. Now, synchrophasor technology. So what is the motivation behind this technology? See, with the advancement in technology, obviously it became possible to develop the devices which are able to measure this voltage and current phasors. Okay, but why were we able to use those kind of technologies? Because there were several blackouts all over the world. Okay, and these blackouts posed us that we should be able to prevent those blackouts only if we know the information what is going on in the system. And this, if every 4 to 6 seconds we are getting some information, that too not time synchronized, isn't? From different far geographical locations we are getting that information, but it is not exactly time synchronized. So you are not having the accurate information about the system. Okay, so that was the problem. And then it was like expected that load is continuously increasing. Anyway, we know all this. So continuous load growth was expected with different kind of generation mix, solar, wind, and different renewable energy sources. So this SCADA system, it was not suitable for real-time control of time-critical applications because it was not the data generation was not sufficiently high with this system. Okay, so it was realized that we should have advanced real-time monitoring tools and wide area controls. Okay, so phasor measurement units. Okay, this was I think this device was developed in Virginia Tech in 1990. Okay, so Virginia Tech was the one to develop this phasor measurement unit. Okay, so and the credit goes to Professor Arun Phadke. So what? Let us see what is this device. So a PMU is a device used to estimate the magnitude and phase angle of voltage or current in the electricity grid using a common time source for synchronization. Okay. And so we have this PMU. So data is taken from PT and CT only. Okay, this from data from PT and CT is coming to this PMU. Then this PMU, it has different components, like it has filter also, it has microprocessor, it has DSP based, like DFT is applied, DSP based DFT algorithm is there, and then this algorithm is used to estimate the phasor values. Okay, so different components are there, PLL is there, and we are getting the times synchronization times clock signal from the GPS. So this is how we are time synchronizing the measurement taken from the different locations. Okay, so this is how these phasor measurement units work. Okay, so this is like, this shows the phasor diagram. So A and B, and with respect to this, we can monitor these phasors. This all, everything we know about it. So I will not talk about it much more. But the another thing is, like, reporting rate of a PMU is 25 to 120 frames per second. So frames is like, as as I told you that at one time stamp, it is giving you three-phase voltage when you are placing it at a bus, isn't it? So it is giving you three-phase voltage phasors, and at the same time, it is giving you the current phasors also in different lines, depending upon the number of channels you are using in PMU, and it is giving you the frequency and rate of change of frequency along with timestamp. So this whole data corresponding to one timestamp, so we call it a frame. Okay, so this PMU, it reports about like 25 to 120 frames per second, and compare it with the traditional system like SCADA. So we were getting 4 to 6 seconds, we were getting one sample. So obviously, when you are getting such a high data, you are generating at such a high rate, you are able to capture the dynamics of the system. Okay? And time synchronization we are achieving is with global positioning system. So here this shows you a substation. This substation means these two generators are there. We are placing here PMU. We are placing here also PMU, and when we are measuring this, so these two PMUs, they will be time synchronized, okay, through GPS, and then so you are measuring this voltage phasors at this bus, voltage phasors at this bus, okay, and current phasors in this line also. This is a small system just to show that how it will measure and then transmit. So it will be at this, because they are synchronized with the GPS system. So at the same time instant, they are measuring the voltage phasors here and voltage phasors here. So these synchro phase, so that is the reason whatever phasor values we are obtaining through PMUs, we call that as synchro phasor. So synchro phasor are time synchronized phasors values, and it allows synchronized real-time measurements of multiple remote points on the grid. So like this, you can have different locations, and from those different locations, you can measure the phasor values at the same time stamp. So it will be giving you these phasor values, and then you can monitor them, that what is going to happen in your grid or what is happening in your grid. Okay. So like this angular separation, so which is basically the angular values. Now this shows, this figure shows the angular separation between 400 kV Kanpur and 400 kV Jabalpur, so which happened on 30th July 2012. Okay. So you can easily see that the event has initiated at this point, and these two regions, this is western region frequency, this is northern region frequency, and then they are going in the opposite direction, so which shows that it is the instability is going to happen. Okay, so like you also can see this angular, so this is also increasing, these oscillations are taking place. So this is like data which you are collecting at a huge rate when you are displaying it with this visuals. So these are helping you to know that something is going to happen. So you need to take the actions very quickly to identify. This was that time we didn't have that much PMUs deployed. After that, the Power Grid has been deployed many more. I think for about 1400 PMUs must have been deployed. This is what I remember now. Okay, so this dynamics of active power flow in the system depends on the power angle between two buses, and this angular separation can indicate that what is happening. And a greater angular separation, it indicates a greater stress between the buses. I think this figure we have taken from a report, but that time this IIT Bombay has placed a PMU device there, so it could capture it was captured at the PMU placed at Kanpur and this Bombay. So now let us see SCADA versus PMU. So resolution of SCADA is very poor, like it is 2 to 4 samples every second. So it is giving you only steady state you are able to see, but PMU, it is giving you 25 to 120 samples every second. So it is giving you like dynamic state observability. Then in measured quantity, if you see, SCADA is only giving you this magnitude only, but PMU is giving you magnitude and phase angles. Then time synchronization is not there in SCADA, but PMU is having this time synchronization. And SCADA can do only local monitoring and control, but PMU wide area monitoring and control is possible. So here you can easily see that this micro PMUs, they have been installed and they are able to capture the dynamics. But this is the black dot line is the measurements obtained from SCADA. So if you see this, you will not be able to see the oscillations, what is happening in the system. But if you zoom it properly, so you will be able to understand that what is going in the, why these oscillations are there and how these oscillations can be damped out. Okay, so this gives the true information, true dynamics of the system. Now, what are the applications of PMU data? So, because the synchrophasors, they are providing the phasor values and these phasor values with time stamps, and from different locations. So you are able to view your power system in real time, or you can say it will provide you greater situational awareness. Okay. So wide area monitoring system based situational awareness, you can use this data so to be more aware about what is happening in the system. But only thing is you need to check what the information you are going to use, whether frequency, whether ROCOF, rate of change of frequency, or phasor values itself. So depending upon your problem statement, you can identify which data will be more useful. Then event detection and localization also you can do. So this kind of thing I'll tell you later in my slide. And then post disturbance analysis, once some disturbance has already taken place, you have historical data with you, you can analyze those to identify why did it happen, even what was the problem, why did it happen, and how it could have been removed. So at least by performing post disturbance analysis, you can prevent any such kind of events in future. So that could be useful. Then dynamic parameter estimation, the parameters are continuously changing, so those things can be utilized. Then model validation, if we are like, we usually do the traditional analysis, for traditional analysis, what we are doing, we assume certain models of these components. The mathematical models are assumed. But how to validate that whatever model you have assumed, that is correct or not? So these PMU data can also be used for model validation, extraction, and calibration. Then WAMS-based dynamic or stability monitoring and prediction. This is also another kind of event which can happen, but it is a significant event. So specifically focused on stability monitoring. You can use this data whether your generators are coherent or not, that you can identify from the data. And then islanding detection in microgrid. So microgrid, basically it can be operated in both grid connected mode and islanded mode. So once, see, in microgrid, the main problem is like once it gets islanded, then the control strategies changes completely in microgrid. So it is very important to identify if islanding has happened, then it is very important to identify it quickly that islanding has happened, so that the control strategies in microgrids can be planned. That what control is, we need to shift the control strategy in the microgrid to balance, because only a small number of generators will be there, inertia also will be less. So to prevent or to operate it safely, we want to detect it quickly. So there also we can use PMU data if we place it like that. So anyway, for placing in the distribution system, now we have micro PMUs also, which can be placed in the distribution system. So here we finish. Okay, I think 2 more slides are there. So this is like wide area monitoring and control. So this like from different phases. See, it is showing you. So the visual will be like this. You can easily see the phasor values here from the different locations you are getting, and then you are finally displaying the information like this, the phasor values of voltage. So it also, as I told you, I think it is similar thing that better situational awareness, it will provide you geographically distant locations can be monitored, and we are getting time synchronized phasor data with very high accuracy. So it is suitable for real-time monitoring, control, and protection. And yeah, so this is National WAMS project architecture in India. So you see, because we operate in like, we have this 5 load dispatch centers, regional load dispatch centers, and in each like SRLDC, you are having this PMUs. These PMU data, they are collected and then sent to PDC, phasor data concentrator. Okay. Now this PDCs, they are receiving this data. So each regional load dispatch center is there, and this regional load dispatch centers, they are collecting for like data for their region only. Then from these regions, they are transferring this data to a national load dispatch center. So these data are collected there, and then they are performing. So this PDC basically it compiles what is the phasor data concentrator when it is receiving the PMU data. So it is aggregating the PMU data, the data received from all these PMUs. It is aggregating here, and here ERLDC also, it is all regional load dispatch center will do like this, and then all these from PDCs, this data will be communicated to National Load Dispatch Center. So where all this data will be collected here, and then this will be utilized for monitoring the real-time situation in the national grid. Okay, so this is how it has been planned. So now we'll move to data analytics based fault identification. So shall we take a break or continue here?
Ma'am, as per your convenience, ma'am, if you want to break, then we
No,
will.
I do not want to take if the participant like what you are doing.
Yes, ma'am. Usually we stretch it till 1 and then we break at 1 o'clock, ma'am.
Okay, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So anybody is having any question here?
Any of the participants, kindly ask your questions if you are having any questions, because I could see in the chat box there were Praveen sir. Anybody is having any question? Like Praveen sir asked, ma'am, what is the difference between data analytics and data analysis?
The data?
Analytics and data analysis.
No, it is same thing.
Okay. Ma'am, no other question is seen in the
No
chat
other question?
any of the participants, kindly unmute yourself and ask question if you are having any queries, or we will move forward. Ma'am, I don't think so anybody is having.
Okay, okay. So then it means that people are not understanding if they're not having any question.
Or ma'am, you are explaining it that well that they don't have a question.
No, the case is very rare actually. It is usual that if nobody is asking question, it means that they're not able to understand.
No, ma'am, I don't think so.
So
That.
any
No, ma'am, your
information,
explanation is very good.
Okay, so could you just tell me like if anything was repeated from the previous days? Because
No.
everybody is giving.
No, ma'am. Actually, till now nobody has taught about data analytics, and
Okay.
because we were only dealing with AI and ANN theory part we were going on.
Okay. 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 So okay, now let us see how this data analytics based like fault identification can be carried out. So you have a data, and then how can you use that data to identify fault in the system? So basically, in this case, our objectives were we want to identify the symmetric and asymmetric transmission line faults in the system under varying parameters. Like fault, like we want to have a AI system where when like for different kind of faults, for different locations of fault, and for different fault resistances, whenever it occurs, our system should be able to identify that what kind of fault it is. So when we did the literature review also, we found the problem that when the event occurrence people were considering, they were simply identifying like if the transmission line fault has occurred, or generator loss has occurred, or load loss has occurred, or like, because see, if you are switching the capacitor, shunt capacitor on, switching the shunt capacitor off, that is also a kind of event in the system. So there could be different kind of events, and you should try to develop a method where these different events can be identified. But if like you are identifying the transmission line faults have occurred, then the next step should be, it is not sufficient to know that the transmission line fault has occurred. You should be able to identify that what kind of fault is there and what is its location, so that it can be the proper control action can be taken to restore the system. Okay, so in this particular case, our objective was to identify the symmetric and asymmetric transmission line faults. And so we want to classify single line to ground, double line to ground, and three phase to ground faults. And as I told you, that the number of input features are always important. Okay, so we want to use lesser number of input features. We have seen that people have done the work, but the number of input features used to classify these kind of faults was quite long. Okay, so we wanted to use lesser number of input features. So this was the other objective. And then as we know that SVM is quite popular for classification accuracy, so we want to use this SVM formulation for identification of faults, but the conventional SVM is only binary classifier. So it can be extended for multi-class classification, and there are two possibilities for multi-class classification. We have two models. One is 1 against 1 and one is 1 against all. So we want to check that which one will be better to classify the different types of faults. Okay. So now when we planned this work, we were considering that how the ideally how one would like to the approach to work. So first is when you are receiving this streaming synchrophasor data, from that data only you should be able to identify if some event has taken. As in, if some event has taken, if no event has taken, no action is required. But if you identify that certain event has taken, the next question comes to the mind that where it has happened. As in, because we directly go, see, if you are considering approach where only you are identifying events, so the first thing should be what kind of event has happened. Isn't? But here, because we have considered fault detection as an event, so we directly move to where it has happened. Once we have found out where it has happened, then what event? Now, what event? So event here corresponds to fault. Okay. So what fault has happened? What kind of fault has happened? This was the next thing. So we moved in this way only. So first of all, we identified that whether fault has happened or not. So if fault has happened, then the next question is where it has happened. And once we identified that the location, then what kind of fault has happened? This is what we want to know. Okay. So now to detect whether the event has happened, so this Steger-Kaiser energy operator based event detection, which was proposed in this method, we used this approach only because it was found to work accurately for identifying that some event has happened, not the kind of event. Okay, although these people have used this information for different kind of events, but we found that there was certain problem. This was not able to identify oscillatory kind of events in the system. Okay, but what the transient kind of events, when events, so then we analyzed it deeply, and then we found that if we just want to identify that some event has happened, then this method works good. So we use this Steger-Kaiser energy operator based event detection, where this is the transient energy of the signal at nth sample. Okay, so this computes the transient energy of the signal, and then this is the energy value. Because we have used the frequency parameter here, it is frequency is considered as the global parameter. Okay, so it carries a lot of information about if some event has happened, then definitely frequency will change. So we used here frequency only as the parameter. So we computed this at kth instant. We computed this energy value. So during transient, so you continuously compute this energy value at each and every instant, and then we defined operator D. So if this energy value is greater than some threshold, which needs to be identified by trial and error. So these are the problems with the data analytics method, because when certain thresholds are required, you need to analyze it very deeply to understand, to set the proper thresholds. Okay. So this, if it is greater than some threshold beta, which we have taken as 0.01 value. Okay, after making many changes to this beta, we realized that 0.01 is able to identify all kind of like if event is happening. So if this is greater than this threshold, then this t value will be 1, which indicates that the this has happened, some event has happened. Otherwise, it will be kept 0. So this is the simple procedure to identify if event has happened. Okay. So once event has happened, this is showing you. We have actually simulated this on 14 bus system, and we have a facility real-time digital simulator at IIT Indore. And this real-time digital simulator, basically, the advantage it is having is it performs the simulations in real time. So like for certain simulation part, you are taking is 0.05 milliseconds or 5 milliseconds. It in real time also it will take, that thing will take in 5 milliseconds only. It is not like this time will be different. Okay, so this simulator allows us to place phasor measurement units also, soft PMUs, which we call. So they are not hard PMUs, but in the simulation model, we can place soft PMUs, which will generate the data in the same way as the actual PMU generates. Okay, and these data are time synchronized also. I'll show you later on about this facility. So these are time synchronized data. So in a 14 bus system, now, usually when we place the PMUs, our objective is that the system should be completely observable. Okay, so to keep the system completely observable, we found, and it is well reported in the literature, that for the system to be observable completely, PMUs in 14 bus system should be placed at bus 2, bus 6, and bus 9. So we placed at these PMUs at 2, 6, and 9, and this zoomed value it shows for the first two things. Okay. So you can see that the change is reflected. Now, so this is transient. Rest all no transients are there. But this is the 0.01. Okay, this line, this horizontal line, if we are able to see about the axis, this is like the threshold of 0.01. So this has been kept to that if this threshold is crossed at this value, so this indicates that some event has happened at this point. So this is how this Stiger-Keza energy operator is used to know about the event occurrence. Okay. Now, once the event has occurred, our next task was to localize that event, where that event has happened. So these PMUs which we have placed at bus 2, 6, and 9, so they were measuring three-phase voltage phases. Okay. So now we have done like voltage deviation based event localization, which was taken from this paper. Okay, they have done like rule-based analytics. So we have compared our work with this method also, but they've used like voltage deviation-based event localization. So like del VI is this VSSI is the steady-state voltage, and VSAG I is defined as some event has happened. Okay. Now, usually this fault, we are considering fault as the event here. So when the fault happens in the power system, it is usually cleared in 3 to 8 cycles. Okay. So now how much data we need to consider for this? So once we identify that the fault has occurred, so because we are using this PMU data, we know the time stamp also, at which time this event has initiated. So we have taken +8 cycles and -8 cycles. So that window has been considered, okay, so that we don't lose on any information. So that window is considered, and then after like the minimum voltage in that window, okay, is considered as the during fault. So minimum voltage during fault is considered as the VSAG I. So this is the voltage deviation. Now this voltage deviation is calculated for each phase A, B, and C. And then we have calculated the average value of voltage deviation for the 3 phases. Now this 3 phases, when we have calculated average value of the voltage deviation, we identified that which is the maximum. Okay. So this refers to PMU indexing. So we have this because these measurements we are getting only from bus 2, 6, and 9. Although because system is observable, we can calculate these phasor values at all other places also, at all other buses also. But that will take certain time. So what we did, whatever PMU data we are getting, we used only that information immediately. So this average value of the voltage deviation for the 3 phases is seen for all the 3 PMUs, and then we have identified that at which PMU this is the maximum. Okay, So whatever is the maximum, if suppose like PMU2 has got this value to be maximum, then it indicates that the fault is close to that PMU. Okay, so this is what it is written, that PMU with the highest value of del VT, it lies closest to the fault. So this is how an idea has been taken where the fault will be, possibly the location of fault is there. Okay, so this PMU data we have this is how we have identified the event localization. Now feature extraction. So we all know that if single line to ground fault has happened, so suppose we are considering that phase A to ground, this fault has happened. So obviously that phase A voltage only will dip. There will be, maximum dip will be in the phase A voltage. Phase B and phase C voltage will not differ much, isn't it? So this thing we verified from this values which we took from the PMU. So it will observe that it is experienced only by the faulty phase during single line to ground fault, whereas the other two healthy phases maintain their voltage. So this was like case one, phase A length is equal to this at initial point itself, we have created the fault, and this is R is equal to 0.5 ohm has been taken. So this is one observation. Then second observation is when we have created line to ground fault, double line to ground fault. So the two faulty phases have greater sag, isn't it? Which is obvious actually, and healthy phase is unaffected. So this information we noticed from this, that phase A and B, it was done, fault is created between A, B to ground. So every PMU is having, at every PMU phase A, B to voltage phase A to B, both are dipped. Other is not affected that much. Then obviously in triple LG fault, it will have voltage sag in all the three phases. So these observations were verified first through the data, and then we moved on like feature extracting. So we understood only this information is sufficient to identify what kind of fault has occurred, isn't it? So features are extracted using the information of drop in voltage for each phase during fault window. So I'll show you that. See, as I told you now, that this is the instance at which it is identified that the fault has occurred. So this is plus 8 cycles and plus 8 cycles and minus 8 cycles were considered. So this long window is considered to extract this thing also. So features are extracted using the information of drop in voltage for each phase during fault window. So V drop I is defined like this. Okay, and then we have, like, after extracting these features, they are normalized. Okay, in the range 0 to 1. Now, what different events we have considered? So single line to ground fault at phase A, phase B, phase C, and they are labeled like this. Then double line to ground fault at phase AB, AC, BC are like this. Triple LG at phase ABC like this. Okay, and if some fault is like misclassified, so we kept it as unclassified and 0. So this I'll tell you in which approach we have considered it like this. Now feature extraction. So these are the normalized values of voltage drop for phase A, phase B, and phase C, and for different faults like single line to ground fault at A, B, C, double line to ground fault at A, B, AC, BC, and triple line to ground fault. For all this, we have plotted these, and we notice, so this is like single line to ground fault. This is like single line to ground fault for B phase. This is for C phase. So we can notice that this SLG faults, they are more concentrated on the X, Y, and Z axis. They are concentrated on the axis only. And then double line to ground faults, they are concentrated on this plane, X, Y, Y, Z, and XZ plane. And three phase faults, they are lying on the diagonal. Okay. Now we use support vector machine to classify these faults. So support vector machine is a binary classification technique, and the objective here is to separate binary classes. So these are the two classes. Misclassification possibility is less. So this is the mathematical formulation for SVM. And Now this concept of binary classification can be extended to multi-class classification also. How this support vector machines can be used for multi-class classification in two ways. One is one against all and the other is one against one. So this figure tells you that suppose we have three classes, okay, class 1, class 2 and class 3. So in one against all, so that classifier, it will be like combining this to 2 and
Ma'am, there is some difficulty. Hello, ma'am. Ma'am, your mic is muted, ma'am.
mute. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Now can you hear me?
Yes,
I
ma'am.
think the internet connection actually it went
Yeah.
for a short moment.
Okay, ma'am.
That was the reason.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I think I need to share the screen again.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Is it visible now?
Yes, ma'am. It is visible.
Yes.
So now this multi-class support vector machine. So there are two approaches: one against all and one against one. So as we are looking in this figure, we have three classes. Okay, so this is class 1, class 2, class 3. So we will have three classifiers here. One classifier, so it will separate this class 1 from this 2. Okay, so other class means it will become this class 2 and 3 is considered as all, and then this is class 1. Similarly, you have this plane 2 and all. So this is separating this class 2 from third and 1. Then this is plane 3 and all, so it is separating class 3 and all. So like this, if you have n number of classes, in one against all, you will require n number of classifiers only. Okay, but then other is one against one. So in one against one, what you will do, you will have a classifier to classify 1 to 2. Then you will have another classifier which will classify 2 and 3, and then other classifier which have 1 and 3. Now, how do we obtain the final outcome of the classifier? So like suppose some class, when you are using plane 1, 2. So a particular data, it is classified here as plane in class 1 by this classifier. And when you are using plane 1, 3, that time that data is classified again as class 1 in that classifier. So that will be taken. So like whichever the data which is getting maximum number of levels by classifier, that is common label, that will be considered as that class. So if suppose we are classifying certain data which this classifier classifies as class 1, but this 1, 3 classifies as class 3, and 2, 3 also classifies as class 3. So that will be considered in class 3, not in class 1. So this is how this combines. So if you are using one against one approach, then it requires n into n minus 1 by 2 number of classifiers for n number of classes. So as the number of classes increase in one against one, the total number of classifiers also will increase to classify the number of classes. Okay. This is how. So I hope this thing is clear to you how this two kind of classification approach works. Now the SVM parameter tuning. So in any AI technique, the parameter tuning is also very important. How do you tune? And it is obtained by trial and error only. There is no organized or systematic guideline to set the parameters. So the performance of SVM is regulated by two user-defined parameters, which are known as box constraint phi and gamma value. So if you keep the large value of phi, so it will make the margin will be small. If you can see from here, the margin of this one is small. So it has, this plane is shifted here and the margin is reduced if you are keeping large value of phi, but it will not tolerate any misclassification. But if you are setting the phi value small, the margin will be high, but some smaller misclassification will be there. So this is classified in this class. Okay, so this is how by trial and error you need to set the value, and then gamma value is there. So a low value of gamma translates, it means that there is a greater influence between two examples, but a large value means influences is smaller. Okay. So these two parameters, they are tuned using k-fold cross validation and grid search technique. Grid search means it is trial and error for different values. Now this is the flowchart of the proposed classification model. So this the bold line shows the training procedure, and the dotted line shows what steps will be required to be done during the testing. So training is done. So training synchrophasor data. So we are getting this VA, VB, VC, and frequency. Only this information we are using. Although when you generate the PMU data, you will get all the voltage phasors, means voltage phasors and current phasors, frequency, and ROCOA. But from those data available, we are using only the magnitude of like VA, VB, VC, and frequency. Only these things are required for this approach. So we are utilizing only this. So now we are calculating the energy. When this streaming data is streaming, for each stamp, we are calculating the energy, and then we are checking that whether this energy is greater than 0.01. If it is not, then it means no event is detected, or no event has occurred. When it is greater, then it says that event has occurred. So now we know from the time stamp here. So we identify the fault window for plus minus 8 cycles. Once we identify that, we calculate del Vt max. So we first calculate del Vi for each phase as VSSI minus VSEC-I, and then for each, like for PMU. So we calculate del Vt max for fault localization. Once you obtain that, then you extract the feature and normalize between 0 and 1. After that, you are tuned, like SVM is trained and parameter tuning is done. Then you have trained SVM model. So output labels and calculate the accuracy. What is the accuracy of this training model? When you have trained it, that time you will simply receive this streaming test synchrophasor data, and with this you will identify whether the event has occurred or not. Once the event has occurred, you will simply identify the fault window, fault localization, feature extraction, and after feature extraction, you will immediately come to trend model. You will give those extracted features to the trend model, and it will tell you the class, in which class this event falls. So this is how this method works. So this is like IEEE 14-bus system, which comprises of 5 generators and 11 loads are used for the simulation of power system faults. And this IEEE 14-bus system is developed in RSCAD, which is provided with the RTDS system, because that RTDS system, it works with RSCAD only. So PMUs are placed at bus 2, 6, and 9 to achieve complete system observability. Now simulation results. Simulation is performed on real-time digital simulator. So this digital simulator is provided with Giga Transceiver Network Communication Card GTNet, which provides a real-time communication link to and from the simulator. So when we are generating this, so it is going in the computer, we develop this RSCAD model. So this inputs, when you simulate, it goes to the real-time digital simulator, and then the data which is generated there, it is communicated back through Ethernet. So the GT-Sync card is used to synchronize the RTDS simulation time step to an external time reference, and time reference is generated using the internal on-card oscillator. Now simulations, they are performed for different faults, different resistance values, and at different line lengths. And total 536 faults are simulated, out of which 240 are SLG, 224 are LLT, and 72 are triple LLT faults. So this is RTDS system. So in this PC, we have developed this 14-bus system. Then this 14-bus system, so it is transmitted through Ethernet to this RTDS system. Now this GTNet is used to communicate. This GTNet card, it is used to communicate through this Ethernet from here to here. And this GT-Sync is used for time synchronization. Okay. Now this is 1-against-1 SVM classification. So the classifier is able to differentiate inter-class faults as well as intra-class faults. And 70% of the fault events is used for training, and remaining 30% is used for testing. So 1-against-1, I told you that if you have 3 classes, so only 3 n into n minus 1 by 2 classifiers are required for n class classification. And here we have 7 classes. So 21 classifiers are required for fault identification. And this 1 against 1 is a linear classifier, so we don't need gamma parameter, only C is needed. Now, as I told you that we use k-fold cross validation. So by trial and error, we identified that how many folds will be needed. So we kept K as 5. So 5-fold cross validation. So it means that training set is divided into 5 parts. The training set only. The training set is divided into 5 parts, and the 4 parts were used for training, and the 1 part is used for testing. And it will be run for 5 times. Okay. It will be run for 5 times. Every time we'll change the testing part with the previous one, like which was included in training. So all 5 parts will be used one by one for testing, and all 4 parts will be used for training. Okay. Then we'll compute that in which case the accuracy was there. So this is how like different folds were tried, and then we identified that the 5-fold cross validation is giving us the maximum accuracy during the training. So we used 5-fold cross validation to set this C value. Okay. Now this is the C value for different pairs. So class AB, class AC, class AAB, like this different classifiers were developed, and for each classifier different C values were used. So now it is showing you single line to ground faults on phase A and B using OAO approach. So you can see that this hyperplane is formed. So it is able to separate this class A fault also and class B fault also, which occur on a different phase of the transmission line. So both are the same types of faults. So this classifier is able to classify the same types of faults. This is one thing we checked, and then we checked that it is also able to classify different kind of faults. So this is like single line to ground fault on phase A and LLG fault AB. So it is able to classify the same type of faults as well as different types of faults. Then this is OAA SVM classification. So in 1 against all, you require the number of classifiers as only n. So here we have 7 classes. So 7 classifiers are required. So here, because the nonlinear, this is a nonlinear plane is formed here, I will show you in the result. So we have to take a kernel function also, which we have taken as radial basis function. Okay. So this is both the C and gamma values are used here. Now this shows you, so see, this is the nonlinear plane is formed here. In the previous case, 1 against 1, linear plane was formed when you were finding the classifier, when it was able to distinguish between the 2 classes. So 1 against 1 we used, so it only linear hyperplane was formed. But when you are using this OAA approach, so non-linear plane is formed here. So it is non-linearly separable. Now, see, this is single line to ground A, this is single line to ground C, this is single line to ground B. So all these 3 classes are separated by non-linear planes. Then this is like single line to ground fault on phase A using OA. So like this is A, and all these faults, now 6 types of faults will come here. This is how this 1 against all works. So this is like for LLG AB and then all. So you can see in each and every case this non-linear hyperplane is formed. So now we compared our method with the rule-based method also. Okay. So single line to ground fault, now rule-based method. So we need to set up rules. So you need to identify, you need to study the data very carefully to set these thresholds. Okay. So we identified that when this data was studied, so we identified that one phase with SLG fault will have voltage set below 0.92 per unit, and the other healthy phases must have voltage set above 0.92 per unit. So this becomes the threshold. Then for double line to ground fault, 2 phases with faults will have a voltage set in the range 0.35 per unit to 0.92, and the healthy phase will have above 0.92 per unit. For triple LG faults, the voltage sag must be below 96 per unit in all the faulty phases, and the maximum percentage voltage sag deviation should be less than 10%. So these were the rules framed to identify this particular types of fault. And then we compared our method with this rule-based method. So here when I'm reporting this result, so these models are executed 5 times and average accuracy is reported along with training time. So you can see that OAO, it has 1 against 1, although it requires 21 classifiers, but it is having lower training time in comparison to OAA. Okay, and then accuracy is also more in 1 against 1. It is less in 1 against all. Okay, so and the training time of the rule-based method, so it is like whatever time is needed to find the set of threshold to identify most faults, that can be considered as the training time, and it has even lesser accuracy than OAO and OAA. So in multiple runs, even though this OAA has a lower accuracy than OAO, but it will always identify the misclassified examples in class 0. What will happen in 1 against 1? I told you that in 1 against 1, like suppose, as we have considered this example, classes classification of 3 classes, 1, 2, 3. So when it is classified, suppose a pattern is classified is by in class 1 by 1 to 2 classifier, and by 1, 3 classifier it is classified in 3rd class. Okay, so then you will look for the pattern in whether it is classified in class 2 or 3 by class 2, 3 classifier. So maximum number of times if it is classified as 3, it will be counted as is in class 3. But there is a possibility that this can give a misclassification for certain pattern. But in 1 against all, what will happen, what we did, that if it is misclassified, so it is coming in 0, class 0. Misclassified examples are there in class 0. So now this shows you the confusion matrix. So this is like rule-based predicted class labels. This is for one particular set. The previous one was 5 runs, but this is for one particular run we have taken. So this rule-based, it gives accuracy of 90.63%. So this is like the true class labels are this, and these are the predicted class labels. So true class labels are this one. Okay. Then, so this gives accuracy of 90.60%. 1 against all, it gives accuracy of 95.63%. And 1 against 1 gives 100%. For one particular run, it gave 100%. See, but thing is, like, we can easily know that these cases are being classified in class 0. It means these cases are misclassified. Here, for one particular case, we get 100%. But if certain case is misclassified, it will be giving in some other class. So this one is considered, 1 against all is considered to be more safe because all others are accurate, but only if it is misclassified, it will come in class 0. So here I can conclude this, that the OAO and OAA formulation, they perform better than the rule-based approach, but OAO approach offers a higher accuracy in comparison to OAA approach. But OA offers a more accurate situational awareness of power grid because all misclassified faults are always identified in class 0. So the rule-based method is not that good because it may not be applicable to a generalized fault detection system because you need to analyze the fault data and update that threshold. As the database goes on changing, you may need to update the threshold. So that is not good enough. So here I finish. So any questions?
Thank you, ma'am. All the participants, I request you, if you have any queries, kindly unmute yourself and ask questions.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, as a beginner, we have available 2 platforms, MATLAB coding and coding in Python.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you suggest?
See, actually you can use this, but only thing, this MATLAB also can be used, but only thing is that the real-time data should be available with you, isn't? Because whenever you are doing this thing in MATLAB, like you won't be able to generate the PMU data that accurately. So in that case, you should be having some real-time PMU data isn't available. So you can always see for the sources. Like sometimes people use and they share the source also from where you can identify those data. I don't know in PMU case, but I know that smart meter data for different countries, they are available at some sites. If you go through the paper in the smart meter data, they have actually defined this, that this is the source from where you can take the data and you can use those data for different problems. Okay, so in that case, you can use MATLAB and Python also.
But which one
We
is
have-
which
Yeah.
one is better, ma'am?
See, that is difficult to comment, whichever way you feel comfortable.
Okay.
As in Python is, people say that it is easy to use. I don't know about Python. I have not used it. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So, and there are, I think, many data analytics tools are also freely available. Isn't? So when you are using this data analytic tool, so the main thing is data should be available with you. And if you consider, see, our power system, this AI applications to power system is not new, isn't? But the problem which AI were facing, have you ever heard that AI has been used practically in the system?
No.
No. Only for load forecasting it has been used, or for renewable energy forecasting it is being used.
Yes.
Okay. But all other applications, it is not being used. What is the problem? There are many problems. The main problem is of data generation only. Isn't, you need to generate that much data, and you were not having those data earlier days. But now you have lot of data available with you. So now AI is again becoming very interesting in this smart grid. Because the problem with this AI was you need to generate the data. So for each and every system, you should generate data, and then that generated data and generation of the data itself was quite complex, isn't it? Because a large amount of data, and for all possible conditions, you should be able to generate. So that was not possible actually. That was not practical, isn't it? But now you have data available with you. So data generation problem is not there. So you should try to use the data which is already generated. That data you should be able to utilize for your problem.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Yeah.